Hey guys, good morning. We'll get started in just a minute here.
Hey Joe, can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you now. I didn't hear when you first started.
Good.
Going. How are you doing, Alex?
Good.
Chris? Hi, Jolly.
Do you have snow up there?
It was like I'm in North Carolina now. I have a family wedding next week. It like snowed. It was weird. It like snowed and then it rained. So when we woke up, there was no snow.
Hmm.
The rain melted it all.
Hmm.
How much snow did you get? I didn't know you're in North Carolina.
Yeah, I have a family wedding in Charlotte next week. So I'm in North Carolina for a few days.
I'm Jolly, by the way.
I mean,
For anyone I don't know on here.
It's probably good that the snow melted then if you have to travel to the wedding and get in a car and stuff like that, move around. So
I'll give people another minute to hop on here. But if anyone wants to introduce themselves, or you guys have any ideas, has everyone read up on all the different links we've been posting?
yeah, a little bit.
Hey guys,
Hey,
Paul here
morning,
from
Paul.
Kilt. How we doing?
Good. Thanks for being here.
Where are you guys from?
I live in Tampa, Florida.
Yeah.
Queens, New York.
Sorry, where?
Oh, Queens, New York City.
Oh, no way. Cool. Stateside. I'm up in Canada, Northern Ontario.
Very cool.
I'm in Jersey City, New Jersey usually, but I'm in North Carolina today.
Very nice. When I was a rebellious teenager, I traveled to Daytona Beach for spring break.
Hmm.
That's my only experience through like Carolina.
I grew up next to Daytona Beach, so.
Oh, nice. Yeah, cool.
Hey guys, happy to join. How's everybody?
Good.
Hey, morning, Katie.
Hey,
Morning.
good morning. You guys ready for a hackathon?
When I get ready.
Yeah.
Are we waiting on anybody else, Joe? Oh, Henry.
I think we can give maybe people one more minute. I'm setting up a Google Drive link that we can work together on and a Figma whiteboard. And then we can get started. I just have some things I wanted to mention. I don't know
Where
if
is
we're expecting
everybody? Are you guys, what state is everybody in?
Florida?
Florida?
New York.
Hey, Chris.
Hey, Katie, how you doing? Florida as well, Orlando. I'm not too far from Daytona.
Ontario here.
Nice. What's the weather like up there?
Mm,
Holy moly. Forget that.
it's it's about like minus 25, I think, right now, so it's quite chilly.
Ooh,
Yeah.
thanks.
Yeah, it's 70, sorry, buddy, and sunny. Although we have to deal with July summers and you don't, so.
Yeah, that's true.
All right, I think we can go ahead and get started. I think pretty much all of you have met me before, but just really quick, I'm a landscape architect and community planner, and I've been doing permaculture design for like 5 or 6 years. And I've just recently got into the Web3 space with my buddy Hamid. Glad to see you, Hamid. And we did like a first place project at the DAO Global Hackathon. So I think, you go through one hackathon, you're a hackathon veteran. That's what someone else told me. So I'm going to stick with that. So I think we have a variety of skills and technical and non-technical and design and non-design people on the call today. So I'm really happy that you are all here. Thank you so much. It's really cool to see this many people on the call. But about the public land protocol, that's like brand new, like 3 weeks old, and really just trying to take my background in land-based regenerative design and see how it intersects with crypto, and the new things going on with regenerative finance have been really exciting for me to see. So the Sovereign Nature Initiative kind of popped up on our radar as something that we need to participate in to kind of test out some of our theses of what we'd like to see happen with regenerative design on the ground, real world, in real life, communities working to do really cool stuff. And how does that work with crypto? So the hackathon, if you have read about it, there's a particular village, Dequavel, and there's several themes on the website that they go through, like DAO governance and land trusts, and how to work with like some of the toxic stuff on the site. So me and Katie and some other people have already been bouncing around some of our ideas for the hackathon today. And I'm just hoping today we can kind of get to know each other better and kind of solidify who the project team will be for the hackathon. And there is a cash prize for winning the hackathon. And they did give notice that everyone who participates will get part of the cash prize. And I'll just go ahead and say I'm not planning to take any of the cash prize. So I want all of the participants, people from Public Land Protocol, to let's get a win. Let's make some money. I want you guys to hopefully we can get some money out of this and turn this project team into a long-term team of contributors for the Public Land Protocol DAO. So that's kind of where we're at. There's some early ideas that I want to get on paper And we have a Google Doc and a Figma whiteboard that we can go through that today. So that's kind of the background. Anything else you want to add, Katie? Katie's also the co-founder of Public Land Protocol with me. But yeah, I'll just leave it there. If anyone else wants to introduce themselves or share what they're hoping to get out of today or being part of this team, I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Yeah, I'll introduce myself. I have a background in business and marketing, and Joe called me with this idea, and I'm brand new to Web3, brand new to creating DAOs, and I didn't know the possibilities behind them. And when he started talking about it to me, like, what if, you know, communities could govern themselves? What if you could stake governance coins and you could make more interest on that than you do in a savings account with your bank, and just all these things? And I'm like, really, that's possible? That can happen? How, you know? And we just went down this. We talked for 2 hours on this call, and it's like all these possibilities behind the DAO, and I had never heard of governance tokens either. And what's really neat is I'm on the board for Propy as well, and Propy does digital virtual real estate in the metaverse. And so they're creating digital twins. So I'm kind of like going in on their calls and listening in, but they have been working on something for so many years, 3 years or so, developing this idea, and they keep hitting these roadblocks. Because it's almost like the governance tokens are like a little loophole because you're not, there's no ownership in it. It's not a utility token. So there's no ownership behind it. And that's what the issue is running into with the people who are trying to tokenize real estate. And they're really not completely they haven't completely figured it out. So it's interesting, but I love what we're doing, that we're doing governance tokens and not ownership tokens. So that's the big difference with how we're operating with our idea. We'll talk about it some more, but yeah.
So I'll just say I've known Katie for a few years now. I work with her. I'm very interested in getting something. I'm a crypto investor for a little while now, not too long, but I've just been investing in the actual tokens like Bitcoin, ETH, and some others. But I do belong to a community, and they do issue governance tokens, Katie. And what they've done is they have allowed people to purchase those tokens, and then you lock them up for a set period of time, and you receive those governance tokens depending on how much you lock those tokens up for. So that's the way that they are handling it. That might be something that could be considered, is almost like putting your, it's putting people who have like-minded views and like-minded goals all committing to a certain amount of lockup, knowing that we're fully committed for this period of time. And it makes it very, to me, it seems like a model that could work. And then you're rewarded in those tokens as depending on how the structure is happening. But the governance tokens themselves, all they do is enable you to vote on the SIPs, I think they call sovereign something protocol, improvement protocols. So that's another way that they do it.
Yeah, and Joe and I talked about that too, how you can stake, if you're staking and not selling your coins for the first, like say the first 2 weeks. So we're trying to create it so that there's not, what do we call it? Like people who aren't participating and just selling their coins and not voting or participating. We want participants. We want to incentivize that. Yeah.
Any more introductions before we get into more of these details?
Maybe I'll introduce myself quickly. So my name is Paul. I work for a blockchain project called Kilt Protocol. Kilt Protocol is purpose-built for identity and verifiable credentials. And then when I think of like nature as being self-sovereign, identity is a huge part of being able to have inherent value and make decisions for yourself. And curious to explore whether it's possible to give actors in an environment identity and then credentials and value and this sort of thing. So
Cool.
I'm Alex Anderson. I'm a landscape architect. I'm very new to this. I had to actually Google a lot of the terms that are in some of these like information, the sovereign nature initiative, like just what Joe sent me. I had no idea that it existed and had to look up a lot of the stuff that they were talking about. But rewilding and just being like a steward for nature and that's kind of stuff that I'm been into for years, and I'm excited to help you guys out however I can.
Yeah.
Jolly
Welcome.
Patel. Oh, sorry. So I used to be a former corporate banker. So I worked in banking for 5 years. And then I quit late last year to pursue something in environmental sustainability. And this was a great opportunity to jump in and something very different. This isn't the way I expected to look at environmental sustainability, but it's just something that I had never even heard of. And I've been learning about everything for the last couple of weeks. And yeah, I'm excited to see where it goes.
So we got Iowa, Florida, Canada. You missing anybody?
New York.
New York. Sorry about that.
New Jersey. Cool, guys. Well, nice to officially have everybody, and let's get to it. What do you think, Joe?
Okay, cool. So I dropped a link to a Google Doc in there, and I have like a rough outline of what we should get done today. There's, I guess, 2 things, and they may be combined, they may be separate, but there's 2 sort of concepts for what we'd like to present at the hackathon that we can go over. But I wanted to give the opportunity if there were other ideas, so we can start from a very broad context and keep narrowing down. And then at the end of today, I'd like to solidly have our plan for what we're hoping to deliver. And I know that's a really big goal, but if we can just define the scope, like the general idea, there's a lot of people that have other different ideas in the SNI hackathon or just the SNI Discord. So I guess I wanted to propose that and then work through the Google Drive and the Figma board. And I think we have enough people, we should break down into 2 or 3 different groups. So let's spend a few minutes and brainstorm the general idea. I'll share, we kind of have 2 ideas that may be able to be combined. And then we can move forward from there, maybe add in other ideas. And that's kind of what I'm planning to get done today. And then I did have a POAP for later. So later, I'm hoping we can brainstorm together as a group, identify 2 or 3, ideas, and then break up into teams to tackle that. And then we'll come back together to share where we're at and what we worked on. And we should have a game plan for, hopefully to accomplish what we're trying to do. So if you read into the SNI documents and stuff, there's basically 2 things we need to deliver by February 6th. And it's perfectly fine that we're starting now. We can start early. The actual event does start February 4th. So we have, what is that, like 3 weeks, basically, till it starts. And then like the 2-day event to really get everything done. They will be using Odyssey Momentum, which is a 3D metaverse tool. So we'll have like a little office space with presentation boards, and we can share our Figma and our Google Drives and all that stuff. And then we'll have jury panels and stuff to help us. So the final deliverables is the 1 presentation of 3 to 5 slides just to explain the concept, and then a technical demo. It doesn't have to be super complicated, but probably something on a test net with like the smart contracts or the app interface or something like that. That's the end goal we're trying to get. And hopefully today we can lock down the topic, the concept, and each of us can have an idea of what to do next for it. And so I'll start off with, I think, the two ideas that have been brought up in our past meetings. And number one is, well, actually first, are there any questions on what we're trying to get done today or what the hackathon we have to deliver? Okay, so the first idea for our app that we'd like to propose is we'd like to gamify the maintenance of the village. So actually, I have some images I can share. If you've already been in the presentation briefing, they had some images as well there. Well, let me share my screen. Give me just a second.
While you're doing that, Joe, what is everything that they have going on currently at the Day Seville? Like it was an old shipyard, and now are there people living on it, living there as well as working there?
That's a great question. That's what I that's what I wanted to get into, is the concept for the village.
Yeah.
So what's currently going on there? I think there's about 15 houseboats on, it's an old industrial port, kind of in an urban area of, I forget which city it's actually in the Netherlands.
Amsterdam.
Yeah, I think it's near Amsterdam, but there's some other city that I forget the name of. So it's an industrial port, and then they have a team of architects and designers that petition the city to get and own the land on a lease. And then they've been designing and reworking the houseboats. So this is some pictures of what's currently going on at the village. You can see the houseboats have been repurposed and now are like on land, and they're being lived in. And they have this boardwalk that goes through all the houseboats. So either some of them or all of them have solar panels on top of the houseboats. And then the boardwalk also contains electrical connections. So they all share power. And there was, I don't know if it's still in use, but I saw from a previous, event or something, they had the Juliet token to share solar power between the houseboats and to kind of coordinate energy production between everyone. Very artsy, it's very cool. There's a cafe and a hotel and a workshop that are each like houseboats on the site.
And everything on this site is, well, so they're just letting like nature and the landscape around these houseboats and the boardwalks that they have meandering through the site just live, just do whatever it's going to do. There's no maintenance here, or do they have to weed eat the boardwalk every month, or do we know that answer question? Do we know that?
I think that's a great question. I don't know the specific answer to that. I would say we know that they're using some of these native grasses for phytoremediation. There's some toxic chemicals on the site. So they're purposefully planting and maintaining the grassland species to fix those toxic chemicals. And then they're also treating some of their gray water and even black water with like, it's kind of like a reed grass-free bed. Go ahead. Sorry, were you saying something?
Prevalence of eco-villages. Does anyone know like how many currently there are, and Because I know it's something so new that I'm just learning about. And I'd love to think that an app that we create could be an overall app for all eco villages or public land. And that
I
it
just
would be
Googled
a
it, Katie, and I just Googled it, and I, take it for what it's worth off this site that says there's about 10,000 in the world.
Oh,
It says
wow.
mainly in rural areas where the inhabitants build societies based on cooperation, self-sufficiency, renewables, and ecological materials.
Okay.
So I'm sure they're small.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good kind of constraint. What we're trying to do here is we want something replicable and scalable for any other community that has similar situation. But so yeah, so the specific idea that we came up with was to how could we gamify the maintenance of this place? And I think there is a question mark on to what specific maintenance has to happen, but we were thinking of what if there's an app, something like Pokemon Go, where you can walk around in the real world and it kind of directs you to a task or an action that you need to complete. Like say, for example, you need to trim the weeds or prune a bush or something like that. Like, could this app direct you to that point and then give you some sort of points on a leaderboard where you are performing the maintenance that the nature needs, and getting points for that, and then the like, I'm losing my train of thought, but the
You can
yeah,
get more.
I just lost where I was going with that. But then the other option would be, or the other idea would be to gamify the engagement and the governance of the place. And so the people that make decisions about what to do next, or if there's any additional installations that need to happen or some direction for the community, that we would have an app sort of like Tinder where you can swipe left or right through the governance proposals. And so between both of those, there would be some sort of identity or reputation for the members of the community that join this app and get on the leaderboard. And then there's the meaning of what that leaderboard is, if there's points or like governance tokens or something like that. So those are kind of the two ideas that we kind of started off with. Yeah, any thoughts on those? Any additional ideas for some sort of app we could design?
Yeah, one thing we thought about also, like, say you're a visitor to one of these villages and you don't actually reside there, or you're a tourist from another country, you can go in and do something actionable in the village or to the public land, and it adds to your profile of things that you've done, and you can receive rewards for it. Like, if you think about like a trip that you've taken that is so memorable, well, what if you actually have a lasting impact on that? And you could say, when I was on my trip, I did this and I did that, and you literally take it as a souvenir almost, and to bring that up, and you can look into your profile, see the places you've been around the world, see the things that you've contributed to, and share that with other people participating on the DAO, and basically have this network of friends, almost like a social media type platform.
I love that.
But where it stays with and adds to your profile. Like, I visited this eco village, I did this, like, look at all the tasks I accomplished, and here are the tokens I got. And that way it's not just affecting the people living there, but globally, you don't lose that connection once you leave, that you can still use those tokens and continue to participate on their voting, and be like, oh, wow, I still check in on places that I've gone and look at the news of, like, Thailand. Like, I love visiting there. And so what if I could actually think of a place that I've gone over there and continue to participate and go, oh, wow, like, they've got this protocol. I think that, new sidewalks there would be really, that's what they need. And you can go in and vote and continue to participate on something and be a world away from it.
I love that. and you could have like different badges. So for instance, my daughter is in the camping thing, and every time we go, there's a badge that's associated with that. And I don't know, maybe there's some incentive model at some point tied into that. That could be a way, you know, because there is always a WIFM for people in the community that you're trying to seek. The WIFM is probably not always monetary based, but that could be something that you could talk about. Maybe not monetary, but earning whatever.
It could also be a way of like gathering like-minded people that want to help the environment, to build something that's going to like not be bulldozed with concrete and pavement, but stay alive and be full of plants. And I think of like the New York people, the High Line.
Highline, yeah.
And that was an abandoned rail system that a group of people just worked together in order to save it and turn it into a park. And so
And it's a major tourist attraction now.
yeah, and it's kind of gotten away from what its
Sure.
original purpose was, but it's still a really cool park that was created by people basically, and people with an interest in that. And this app could do the same thing. Is there could be small things like, you know, clean this park or something like that, and you know, pick up trash and you get a token. But it could also be larger in that like communities log into this app and start working together in order to create something.
I love that, because when we were originally discussing this, we weren't basing it off of eco villages. The Day Seville being our inspiration has definitely you know, made this idea a lot larger. But before that, when we were first getting into it, we were just thinking about blank public land, starting parks, hiking trails, things across the United States. And that way you could say, wow, like I had a task or something to do, like say it's the Ocala National Forest, and like I had an impact there. And it is to save from reckless development. So, you know, right now it's more beneficial to build than to let nature live on its own. And so what the concept I think of this hackathon is to look at, you know, the value of not cutting down the trees and the value in the wood, but what is the value in nature, letting it thrive, and continuing to let it be a park, or let it be woods or a forest, and save more forests. But right now there's not a sustainable way to finance those initiatives. And so there's more value in tearing down the trees and building than letting it survive.
Love it.
Yeah. One other thing that I thought was really fascinating was what happens when, so say this app exists, and now you have a digital community, a global community, a social media platform, and there's some direction of the tasks that need to be completed. That's sort of the digital half of the experience. But what happens in the real world? Like, where does that digital community show up in the village? And so we were talking about if you could have some sort of like digital presentation board or a screen somewhere that like kind of relays, oh, this person's at the top of the leaderboard, or, you know, like how on Twitch, it's like if you donate, then you can have a message displayed or something like that. So maybe it's like some sort of advertisement platform that exists in real life in the village. So even the people who come who know nothing about the app can have some sort of interaction with this digital community, and like other ways that this digital community has a physical presence in the real world. I think like there's a lot of other teams in past hackathons and stuff that's like, it's all about the digital half of things. And I think a lot of crypto native people think in that direction. But as a landscape architect, it's fascinating to see what would happen when that shows up on the site. How is visiting this village different from another village that doesn't have that digital community or that social media platform behind it?
Talked
It can
about
also spread knowledge, like terms like decreasing erosion or habitat for wildlife, improve water quality. Like these are things that parks and the ecosystem does for us, and conservation, you know, and the benefits of it. Not everyone knows these terms, and that these parks and ecosystems are doing that for us. And so this could be a way of letting people know what a tree does.
Yeah, I love that. So we're also, just going off of what you just said, Alex, looking at a way of having an education aspect behind it. And that's something that we're being challenged with the hackathon as well, is how do we bring education into it? Whether it's showing how the tree interacts with the entire ecosystem. So this is the name of the tree. This is, it's basically, if we could animate that process in a way, animate a visual of what's actually going on with the land, and create an education aspect.
Did you say name the tree?
Yeah, yeah, like I have a diagram of it, but it's like showing if there's a way to actually show what's going on. I'll share a screen soon, but I'll have to elaborate a little bit more on that. But just an education aspect about that, so that people are actually learning permaculture and what's going on with the land that they're involved with.
It'd be cool if there was a way to do like holograms. You know how nowadays there's a lot of even zoos that kind of replace animals with like holograms. And I could see something like that happening with the trees. And then you could, you know, go through the process of what's happening, but it's more, you know, it sticks because it's almost like realistic versus just seeing it on a screen.
Yeah, yeah, that's cool.
Are there any more like
that.
ideas to broaden the conversation? Any new separate
Yeah, Joe, I
thoughts?
got some.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Are you still with us?
Oh, no.
I was just going to say, if we have any more ideas to broaden this or additional ideas we haven't explored, let's speak them now, and then we'll try to narrow down and keep getting deeper in the topics.
One question I had was, well, how are the people currently living there? Like, are they just residents, or did they have to like go through a process of, you know, being like they had to apply and they had to go through a screening process? Are people openly allowed to visit?
That's a great question. I know it is a public space. They have a cafe that's open to the public, and they have a hotel that anyone can rent. And the workshop boat has events sometimes that people go to. That's a great question. I don't know how you end up living there.
You hear me now?
Em was on this call. He has an eco village in Sweden. Is it in Sweden? We should ask him that.
Yes, we can hear you, by the way. Well, we
So
could
what
hear.
do you think
Yeah, is
about?
there places like that open for change? Or actually, how can we really incorporate those cafes and restaurants where all consumption happen? I was thinking, hey, maybe we can just create some token just for people use that for time they spent there without having to order something if they don't need. And they just can use that. And those places also gain some value without selling something. But
Yeah.
for naming trees, actually, I asked to neighborhood here, but I don't know like how to name them. There was, I'm living in a building where 50, 70 years ago, some Jewish woman was taken away and, you know, sent to somewhere shitty. That tree was just next to that memorial tomb, so I wanted to name after her, but that's like also educational in other ways, now I realize. But how can people really approach that naming? I mean, is it gonna be people name of people, person name, or does it depend to locality? I mean, can we name it something? Let's say I'm Turkish, but it's a tree in Germany. But like stuff like that could be also cool. I don't know. It's not only street names or a lot of
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah, would be cool.
Well, you know, if you think
like,
about it,
collectively.
I think that's a great idea. Katie, myself, Joe, we all went to Florida State, and I have a, you know, they do those things where you can have a brick and you can name it, but it's just sitting physically in the location. I think if there were opportunities to generate naming things like you're talking about, maybe those rights could live not only physically in the world, but as an NFT. And then you claim your claim to that just shows that you were the person that not owns it, but named it. And that's your gift to that community or whatnot.
Or like donate a tree to the community and then it's named
Correct.
after
Then
you.
it's same thing. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. I think that there's so many avenues to set up as far as donating and supporting these communities and villages without, I think those people who just want to donate should have, there needs to be an avenue for that as well. Because it's like the recognition of it. Like I have a tree named after myself in Amsterdam, or I feel like that goes under the category of donation. So what do you guys think about with the actual, I'm very visual, so I'm trying to visualize what this app is going to look like, and then talk about, the background of how it'll work. But like Joe mentioned at the beginning of the call, like what if the app has two sides of it, and one is tasks or things to do that need to be done with the land that you can actually take on yourself and go do. Like maybe you're walking around and scanning your phone like Pokemon Go, like Joe mentioned, and it shows you, okay, this trash needs to be picked up here, or whatever, the land something needs to happen with it. And then you get rewards for that. And then there's another side of the app, which is the protocol side, where you can take those rewards that you've been granted and go and vote on protocols. And the way that Joe said it earlier, it would be like a tender, like something that's so quick that you could swipe left or right, so that we could literally get thousands of protocols voted on. It shouldn't be this like a hard process. We want it to be like extremely quick, like maybe one line sentences of what needs to be voted on, and you swipe yes or no, yes or no. And then maybe your vote is more weighted depending on the type of tokens you own, or the possibility of having our main PLP token and then rewards tokens that are different, that can contribute in different ways. Joe, correct me, and you probably can explain it better.
That's great. I think for the purposes of this hackathon, we have a blank canvas of any type of token we'd like to create. We are working on 2 different types of tokens for public land protocol. I would put a pin in that, and we can continue that discussion on Discord, if that's okay. So I'm trying to kind of synthesize, I'm in the Google Doc that I shared. I'm trying to synthesize this discussion, and I'm kind of seeing a few different branches emerge. So I guess just tell me if you want to delete any of these branches or create any new ones. I have gamify the landscape maintenance, and that's all about the tasks and leadership of points received. and the educational aspect of the tasks performed. And then next I wrote the animate and visualize what's happening with the land, value the living asset, naming the trees, holograms. And then next I have social media. So these participants, people who are doing this, that they have a global opportunity to participate and relate to one another. And I included there, how does that global community show up in real life? I think that could be included with the social media side. And then lastly is the gamify civic engagement. And that's like a Tinder style, the actual decision-making processes involved with all of that. So those are the 4 branches I would propose. Let's see. Is anyone immediately drawn to any of those? Can we delete any of those? Can we focus any more now? And then I'd like to break out into groups, and each group can explore that more in a Figma whiteboard, and we can start to visualize, like what Katie was saying, what would the actual app look like for each of these? So any thoughts or comments on that? I'm gonna change, I guess you guys might not be able to edit. I'm gonna quickly change the Google Docs so you guys can edit. Sorry about that.
I think that all those are necessary. I mean, I love all those points. If anything I would add, I don't think I would take away anything. I think all those are really important aspects for the whole visual on this. It's
Yeah, I
just
wouldn't
making it all work
delete
together.
anything right now, but I mean, just trying to think about like this self-governing ecosystems is kind of this topic that they want us to explore. We might be careful, like when we're creating the tasks, it seems like we should be selective and just thoughtful in like what tasks we choose to create in this app, because stuff like pruning, for example, it almost sounds like it's going against like the self-governing ecosystem, that you're taking branches off of a tree, even if it, I mean, I guess there's healthy ways to prune a tree, but maybe someone doesn't know the healthy ways of pruning the tree, and so they just destroy a tree. So that's getting into the weeds, I know, but
No, Alex, that's a great point because that's part of the education aspect we wanted to bring into it. Like if
Right.
you're going to do a task, here's a breakdown of how it's done. So yeah, that's a great point. So, I mean, I think like if you're taking on a task, that might have to have a explanation to how it's done.
Mhm.
Maybe even a visual, a little short clip of the proper way to do something. That way people are learning and participating.
I'm drawn towards the gamifying civic engagement though, more than the maintenance.
I think I was gonna ask, do they use the land to produce like food? Like is everything that's grown used by the people on that location, or is it mainly just all more, flowers and things like that? Or are they looking at vegetation of, having plants and vegetables that are used by the people living there?
From the video I've seen, it looks like they're just living there. I mean, because it is grounds that are, toxic, if you will. I'm sure that depends on where you are, though, right? So if you're in, we just said there's 10,000 of them. Let's say it's one in Sweden or whatever, or Switzerland. They might have a different focus, so it could be variable. I think probably per location.
Yeah, and I think that as far as gardening, and we need to have a model for that as well, because like another possibility that we had that Joe and I were talking about is his college, Auburn. They want to get students more involved with the land around campus, and they're willing to experiment with us. So that looks like possibly a garden. that students maintain. So, you know, how does that look? How do we incentivize them to maintain it and bring participation there? So that's definitely something that we're going to touch on, but that these eco-villages may have gardens as well. I'm not sure about the Day Seville specifically, but it's definitely something that we've talked about is all that goes together too.
Is there a potential rewarding on, like, maybe people can use some volunteering time, like earn, and also, you know, like that kind of recreational, not recreational farming, but really like almost community supported agriculture kind of, so that they can stake with their tokens to like farmers, so they can not farmers, like communities doing that kind of plant production with planning with the community, so to say they can foresee what's to produce, or but also like education part especially, so people can be rewarded by, hey, also, yeah, you made it like digitally and you learned that, but how about this one now, like more production side, how can we encourage people really, like yeah, that's great to learn about all that when people are living in urban and we don't even see actually what they look like, those plants, you know, or those trees, or people cannot even say if that's coming from a tree or a bush, you know, that kind of thing. I was thinking, like, as produce stuff at home, fridge, maybe that creates some scene for me based on what I consumed. But as I consume, or we as a household, it will create something that's growing there. That's what we can see there is our consumption in years. And but that's like weird when I talked about it. If that's an egg, then there will be chicken appearing there. So like it's a bit I mean, I don't know, some empathy to that to increase for some, but I'm not vegetarian, I'm trying to, but that's like maybe something we could, yeah, also incorporate. But gamification is gonna solve a lot of things. I think I'm really pro about it. Yeah.
It's a really important point. Like these points or these tokens that we create, what other utilities can they have? I think that's a great idea, that you could somehow stake your points to be participant in funding, like a CSA or something like that, the community supported agriculture.
Do we, just
And
thinking from the identity lens, do we want, like, do we want to gamify with points? Like, so, because points, NFTs, all of these things are transferable, right? And which means that the value they have is finite. I can lose them at some point and then it no longer remains. But if I'm contributing, say, as a volunteer in the real world, I never lose that experience, right? I'm forever known as someone who volunteered for XYZ initiative. And this is where I think identity and credentials make a lot of sense, right? So if you can think of, you know, obtaining a micro badge for contributing to some ecosystem, and then on top of that, that could unlock benefits like coins. But I don't think that that micro badge should be transferable, because then, you know, nefarious actors can just accrue somebody else's experience or somebody else's rewards. You know, we see that a lot with like carbon offsets. So a mining company could be burning coal all day long, and but then they offset it with carbon credits. So, oh, it's okay. Well, it's not okay for the local environment.
That's a really good point. Think about that.
I have just in hearing everyone else talk, I drafted a quick diagram. Maybe I'll share it just to plant a seed. Oh, can I get screen sharing? If it's
Yeah, let me, sorry. Okay, try now.
So I just sort of mapped out everyone's ideas. This is just an idea. Just take it with a grain of salt. So what I'm hearing is that Decibel has a governance, and then community members can vote for governance decisions. And then what I'm thinking is that based on community members' contributions, they can get issued credentials for their efforts. And then those credentials can access various benefits, NFTs, tokens that they can stake. So this would slowly build their reputation. And then the other benefit of having credentials is that outside actors can accept them, right? So with an NFT, like, so let's say I'm a smoothie shop and I want to, and I say to the world, okay, I'm going to accept NFTs that prove you've gone to the gym. If NFTs are transferable, then that doesn't mean much, right? Because am I certain that the people who hold those NFTs are actually gym goers? No, not really. But credentials are non-transferable. So now outside sponsors can trust that if they accept this credential, they know that that person has been a volunteer. They know that they've done XYZ things or contributed to certain ecosystems in the past. And so this is sort of like an additional benefit. So going back to real world, now you can draw benefits from the real world, not just sort of the Web3 space with NFTs and tokens. And then, of course, with these tokens, someone had mentioned that the space itself could accept the tokens as part of like an internal economy, which I think is quite cool. So if you can earn tokens based on your contributions and then like buy a coffee with it, I think is quite interesting.
That's really great, by the way. Love the visual. It's amazing you can come up with that fast.
And so just like full disclaimer, so our concept with our team was this piece here, this getting credentials and then building out outside sponsors. But then also on our team, we have someone from a company called Rewild Africa, and their specialty, I think, would be in education. So it might be neat to have access to education based on your contributions, or maybe not, maybe it's just globally accessible. But so this is like learning about the ecosystem, and then the concept of, you know, as you consume, you're able to see, you know, what you've taken to build up the empathy. I think that's important too for storytelling. But
you know what? I love the name empathy. Maybe that could be the name of the token.
Yeah. So anyways,
EMP token.
So just to plant a seed and get thinking about identity and credentials and whether or not whatever is earned should be transferable. And then how do we bridge the value back to the individual who's done the contributions? And then I'll try to keep my bias out of the discussion in general. And then at the end, we could figure out like, okay, does it make sense to team up with what we're doing? Maybe if your team is lacking just a few members, I can pitch the concept to the others, and if they want to join you, then they can, and I'll just kind of bow out. We're supporting. It's tricky for us because we're supporting the hackathon for people that are using identity and credentials, and then we're also participating as a team. So, but we don't need to participate as a team. I mean, we're here to help, not to like win the hackathon. So yeah, keep this in mind, and then if we're well aligned, we'll figure out a path forward, either by joining teams or I can resource you with the members that we have to fill the education and the credential / like sponsorship.
Thank you, Paul. That's amazing.
Yeah, you literally just took down everything that we've been bouncing back and forth, and that's an amazing visual. So yeah, I think that we could definitely build off of that. And you know, I'm thinking about right now what we're solving, and currently it takes so much energy to the traditional way of sitting on a board and voting and making these decisions and coming in person and getting people to actually go to a community meeting. And so to create this liquidity and get everyone involved, if we could actually make this happen, I mean, how incredible would that be? But then Joe and I were actually talking about solving the financial dilemma for these projects. So how do we also branch the funding? And there's because that's a huge reason that a lot of things don't get done is because of the cost for these projects. So what if we could actually provide zero interest funding indefinitely to them? And there's a way to do that, and it's was it Refi, Joe, that connects
The QiDao.
Yeah. Can you just like really briefly explain that and how we could provide funding for?
Yeah, it's definitely a big topic, but am I frozen? Can you hear me?
No, we can hear you.
It's definitely a big topic. It's hard to explain quickly, but I've been in conversation with the QiDao devs about white labeling a custom pro vault. So they're a lending platform. We could offer staking rewards to people to deposit into our community vault. And then we could distribute zero interest loans to people on the ground from that vault, because My Finance and the QiDao has zero interest loans. So there's no repayment structure. It relieves a lot of the pressure on these groups that are doing really amazing work, but that may not have a solid business model behind it that they can get traditional investment. So that's the really quick version.
Yeah, anyways, I just think that's really incredible to be able to provide funding or find a way to do that.
So we're at 1 hour now, and I know typically it's like just, probably only have 30 to 45 more minutes before everyone's running out of steam. So what I'd like to do is move over to a Figma whiteboard and have breakout rooms where we can individually, let's start to try to draw what does the app interface look like. And it can be as rudimentary as possible. I know not everyone has skills with these types of platforms and tools and stuff like that. So I'm going to change this to anyone with the link can edit. I'm going to put it in here. And then how would you guys like to break out the different groups? In the Google Doc, we have the 4 kind of areas. The gamify the landscape maintenance tasks, animate and visualize what's happening on land, the education. I think social media and credentials is kind of combined. And then gamify civic engagement. So I'll copy these 4 over into the Figma board. We want to each have a group for one of those 4, or how do you want to do it? I guess I can make it a breakout room. You can choose which one you want to join. I'm hearing lots of feedback. I'm going to turn off my video. I'm hearing lots of feedback. I don't know if that's a problem on my side. So did you guys get all of that?
Mhm. We're not seeing the whiteboard though.
Look in the comment, in the link in the comment.
Okay, let me look at that. Gotcha. My bad.
So I guess I'm just gonna make breakout rooms for each of these topics. I'm gonna finish pasting these in, and then let's just spend 20 minutes, like as quick as possible, as sketchy as possible. Just draw something for what that piece of the app would look like. And then we'll come back together and just look at what we have. And we can plan where to go next from there.
This is interesting.
If you don't know Figma, you can press T or type and just draw a box. Just put ideas down. You can grab the pen and just draw with the mouse. And so just, I guess, just start going down below where I put the text box and just keep going on that. I'm going to make the breakout rooms down. Forgive me, I've never really done this. It says, let participants choose room. So I'm going to do 4. And in the Figma, we have 1 through 4 from left to right. So I'm going to put numbers here. And then you can join the Zoom breakout room according to that number. And then hopefully we have enough people in each room. And if we don't, then maybe we don't need to focus on that for that hackathon if nobody cares about it. So just go to the number room that you're most interested in or have the most ideas for. And we'll come back at 12:50 Eastern time. It's only 15 minutes.
Okay.
Just opened all rooms. Did that do something?
How do you get there? Maybe I'm not. Oh, the breakout rooms. I see it. Okay. I see it. Okay. My bad. I've not used this feature on Zoom. All right, cool.
So I'm going to stay in this location now, but go ahead and join the room number for your group.
Where do you join?
Yeah.
There's a, where's it at? Did I get there? Breakout rooms on the Zoom board. Here it says participants, chat, share screen, record. There's like a little icon that shows 4 boxes, breakout rooms. And then you could join whatever breakout room you want to go to.
Then I can move someone if you want to just tell me what you want to go to.
Either one, Joe. Just whatever group needs someone. Yeah, because I'm not seeing these rooms.
Yeah, where at? It's on the
No.
Figma.
It's on Zoom.
Oh,
It's a Zoom function.
oh, I see. Breakout rooms. Okay.
Hamid, Tolgate, do you guys want me to put you in a room?
I'm still thinking which room I should go. So do we have like a room for talking about like this, I mean, about the engineering part? Or here is just like high level idea of things that we want to basically narrow down later?
We need engineering everywhere. We're definitely still figuring out what we're trying to do. I mean, I think, yeah, we need engineering everywhere. So you can have a great input to whichever group you'd like
So
to join.
maybe I can go to social media for now. Which one was social media? Is number 3.
Number 3.
Okay.
Colgate, do you need help finding a room?
It would be great, actually. I think I will just go to Paul's room right now, and then I want to listen a bit.
Okay, Paul went to number 4, so I'll send you there.
Yeah.
Did you get a link to join?
It's on.
On Zoom, you should have a link or a box.
I think I've done it. Box, you say? No.
Hello. Hello, welcome back.
Hi. Yeah, some good
People
brainstorming.
have like 30 seconds left in that other room, so they'll come back soon. I heard you, Hamid. Thank you for joining.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks. Bye.
So I think this is going great. I'm so excited to see what we do. People should, let's see, 15 seconds. They'll come back in a minute. Hi, everyone. Welcome
Hi,
back.
guys.
I think, is that everyone? Yeah, right? There we go.
Yes. Cool. Was that enough? We just were like, what? We just spent 15 minutes. That went by so quick. When our 1 minute timer came on. But yeah, I mean, we could definitely start off and just kind of say what we discussed. We did, Paul, Alex, and Abbas and I did the number 4, gamifying civic engagement. So we did touch on some good points. Paul, can you speak?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
So governance is quite a complex topic, and we figured, for the sake of the hackathon, it would be good to keep it simple. So sort of the POC would be that anyone can create a proposal. So you would issue a proposal like, hey, we should replace the boardwalk with bricks instead of wood, and it's going to cost this many tokens. And then there should be an expert panel that reviews those approvals to discount anything that might be malicious to the community. So not sure what the experts look like. Maybe they're members of the community itself, or maybe they're experts like yourself, Joe, with experience in permaculture and ecosystems. And then this is more just a general idea for the long term. That someone came up with is the idea of the expert panel providing a sliding scale for the required majority for the vote to pass. So for example, you might have a tree that someone issues a proposal to cut down the tree. Well, on the surface, that looks like a bad idea for the environment, but perhaps the impact for the community itself is different. So the experts might say, okay, we can do this, but it has to be a 100% majority vote for it to pass. So, and then finally, the concept of keeping the voting process simple, which of course will be via a Tinder style vote. And so everyone should be able to vote on the proposals that kind of make it to the app.
Right. I just wrote on there delegates. I think we could do the experts. It could be delegates like how ENS and some other platforms do governance, like only the delegates can make proposals and approve them and stuff. That's great.
Yeah, in terms of identity, I was thinking, you know, like you should probably have to apply, you know, to get a credential to participate in the ecosystem. And it could be as simple like, hey, sign up with the app and you get a credential. It doesn't have to be like a complicated process, but yeah, people with vested interest are less likely to make malicious decisions based on just token rewards and the like.
Yeah, and as part of the sliding scale that Paul mentioned, is we talked about like what ends the proposal and you know, and says, okay, it's time to act on it now. And so we thought about like maybe one proposal has 100% majority vote, or maybe another one doesn't need 100% majority vote. But we talked about like, when do we know the proposal is done being voted on? And instead of like, you know, what if we only have a few votes on something? Well, you know, it's not time yet. We need 100 votes on this before it's actionable. And then it closes the voting. So that was kind of an idea there, to get enough votes on something. And it's like, okay, well, we've only got, you know, a few votes on this. Well, there make a requirement there that we need a certain amount before the proposal closes. And I had another thing, but I just lost my train of thought. Somebody else go.
Yeah, I only have a few more minutes. So I wanted to see if I could,
I don't think we maybe we did. I didn't think we did one. Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Joe. So let me zoom in so I can, how do you move left or right on this? On the board so I can see it.
Space bar. You
Okay.
can click and drag.
Oh, I gotcha.
to
Gotcha.
zoom in,
Gotcha.
Or if you go to the
Gotcha.
on
So-
Zoom or on the Figma.
Gotcha. So we have, can you hear me? Everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, so we had gamify landscape maintenance. And so we just, you know, it's crazy how you can get going on this. At first you have no ideas and then they're sort of flying out of your brain, right? So a couple things, obviously we need, you know, the tasks that we identified were obviously having to have an app, downloading it. The other thing is waivers, you know, something that comes, you know, you go prune a tree or do something, you cut your hand off or finger off, who's liable for that? And this is real world stuff. So we have to think about liability waivering and things of that nature, right? Creating a formal sign-up procedure to see available tasks and prevent duplication of efforts. I think that's important to say, hey, what's needed, right? Katie, you had brought up some sort of educational content on how to perform a task. And then the other thing is certain tasks should have a higher point value. You know, if you're just weeding, obviously, then maybe it's not as much as you do something else. And on top of that, certain tasks might require multiple participants, thus earning bonus rewards. We can think about how could you gamify within the gamification itself to have people team up to do the harder tasks, right? Two people make it work, you know, easier than one. And the one thing that was brought up, I thought that was not my idea, was really interesting, was these tasks or NFTs or whatever you want to call them could be used as proof of volunteerism for real world applications. You know, right now, kids going to college, these really selective schools require them to do volunteerism. This could be a way to tie back that world. And then finally, who's in charge of all this, right? So a community manager slash volunteer could be somebody that sort of spearheads certain parts of the operation. And because of that, or their, you know, involvement, they might receive a small override, I call them overrides, but some reward based on the actions performed by the volunteers on a quarterly fashion. It could be monthly or whatever.
Will you explain that again? What is an override?
Okay, sorry. I used to be in the mortgage world a long time ago. An override is like the manager would get a small piece of everybody's deals that were happening at that time, right? So if I had $1 million in deals, I'd get the bulk, you know, commission off that, but the manager, because he's the manager and helps out and is doing the admin side, might get a couple basis points or something like that. So you could call it a reward. Because
Whoa, that's cool. Yeah, you could have the organizer have a share of the total
right,
points,
right.
and then all the
So-
individuals, they have a smaller piece. That's cool.
Yeah, because that way, you know, how do you reward, incentivize somebody to be a leader within the community, to say, hey, I'll take on this wing of projects, and I'll identify what needs to be done, all that stuff, because somebody's got to identify what these proposals are going to be at the end of the day.
I love that idea also for verifying someone's work, right? Like it's nice
Yeah.
to just claim tokens, but there should be some proof of work.
Right. So that's where we landed on.
Awesome.
Anyone from
Did we
group
only-
2?
One question, like when problems are so connected, even within climate action taking and so interconnected, you know, like psychology, this leadership or education, why don't we create a token family like for cows? Or I was actually, that's how I landed to this whole project, and like that brought me. I'm trying to create like token families for arts genres, but abstract stuff, but also where people can make find some meaning, like Joe mentioned empathy or impact, but also like a climate action token, and or based on those, like so people at the end in years could also find some, I don't know, like something to invest to all these based on what they did in these years, and empower themselves, so to say. Those rewards becomes their instrumentals, you know. If they can be, then those people can even achieve much more, and by showing how they did that, like all this journey gonna be actually what attracts all the other people. What I saw is like when you didn't achieve that, whatever that thing,
As you were,
I
I'm
think
not
you
sure.
froze.
I think you're frozen, Abbas, but you immediately made me think of like, this is kind of silly, like your mind goes in all these different directions, but like a karate belt, like if you're a white belt or black belt, you know, from the climate action that you've taken, like you have a recognition for it.
I think this is a common, so I think identity and credentials are so new that no one's really thinking about them yet. But I think this is what a lot of people are trying to solve with tokens and NFTs. But again, it comes back to the fact that they're transferable. So if I go and earn a black belt and I sell it to someone, then it's more valuable. Like it's more valuable if I have it because I've earned it, right? And so I think I think what he's describing is very much a good fit for identity and credentials. And then yes, of course, provide some reward for that kind of earned experience. And then those could, the rewards can be different token families or different benefits, or however you want to organize it is fine. But yeah, I think it's important that we make sure that that experience is captured in a non-transferable way, to honor the experience of the individual.
That kind of ties into, I was on number 3, social media with Hamid. And to just share really quick, we're pretty much at the end of our meeting, but like with the identity and the transferability, me and Hamid were trying to figure out like what is transferable and not transferable, and why you would design it either way. But for social media, like I was just drawing while we were talking, and we think there should definitely be like some sort of profile page where you are showing, this is who I am. You can maybe add your picture and link to your Facebook or whatever else. But this is your collection of like events you went to, badges you got, you did gardening, you got the gardening badge, and now you're a black belt and you got the 3-year badge or whatever. And then like this is something that people have fun creating and sharing, who they are with other people and linking to their other sites. And then the community page would be like specific to that location. So Decovel would have their own page, and that would be kind of like the community calendar, hey, here's what's coming up next, here's the task list we need to achieve, here's the badges we're giving out now for what needs to get done and stuff like that. And then we were just talking about transferring and what should be transferred. And one idea that I had that kind of bridges to these other groups is like, what if this sponsors or these outside donors, what if they can buy badges? So like everyone who built the garden gets a garden badge, and the garden sponsor buys those from each of them, kind of takes them off of the market. Or and maybe it's not transferred, but it's like almost like airdropped. Everyone who owns that credential, you get, hey, here's the money, from selling the vegetables or whatever.
I like the idea of having a badge that's non-transferable, which is like credential that always lives with you. And then you have an NFT twin of that badge. So, I maintain the trees, I get the beaver badge, and I get a beaver NFT. And then I can, if I choose, I can get rid of I could sell the beaver NFT, but the credential of my experience remains. So then this is how it's done in the real world, right? Like I earn a black belt, and the benefit is that I get skills and experience, and I can fight in tournaments and win money and all this thing. The money I can transfer and sell, but the experience, it remains.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, we could have a twin where we display only the credentials true to your profile identity, but there's also a marketplace where donors and sponsors can, get the activities that they want. I mean, imagine you plant a tree and you get paid for the carbon credits that you created throughout the rest of your life. Like that's, anyways, I think we're onto something really cool. I'll leave it there. We can continue to develop the Google Doc and this Figma page. I'm gonna put in the chat. This is a POAP for today. You can go to poap.website/PLP, and you should all claim one. I'll email Hamid and make sure he gets one. But this is the same POAP for the rest of the hackathon. So yeah, I thank you all for being here. Any
Hey, Joe, one
thoughts
real
or-
quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
And I have to say, I really love that, the term like empathy and everything like that. I think naming conventions, naming is hugely important. And I think whatever you decide to name that token, I think should be something that conveys the bigger picture, right? I'm fascinated by how names are made, and for instance, Square just changed their name to Block. Why do they change it to Block? Because Square is focusing solely on Bitcoin. Bitcoins make blocks, right? So it's just fascinating. So whatever we choose, I think it's really important. I just love that word empathy or something like that to carry that moniker.
It's a wonderful thought. And one last thought from me I wanted to put out there was I'm also imagining like conventions of people who are involved in protocols for certain land wanting to get together, like say these people from all over the world want to come together because they're voting on Day Civil, and it gives whoever that land entity is this ability to host a convention for this community. And I relay that back to, you know, the social media aspect of it, to get all these people together. And I see events like that being possible that just bring more attention to these lands and more sponsors and get people talking and visiting and really get their name out there. So it's just a benefit I thought of that could really work with.
Katie, I have a side thought on that. Why don't we use real world examples of things that can really, so you have your big convention, right? You talk about that, maybe that's a yearly occurrence or whatever, but then what if we could borrow from the Premier League soccer or any of these big soccer franchises in the world that have supporters clubs all over the world, really? And you could have a Day Civil supporters club, and you could have a whatever, so everybody can sort of align to their goals, and they could have their own Twitter profiles and all these great things.
Cool.
Yeah, like Friends of the High Line.
Yeah, exactly.
I love it, guys. Let's plan our next meeting. We only have just under 4 weeks. So, and it's still, I know it's really important to simplify just for the hackathon. And then after that, I mean, we're really going to dive into it. Hopefully we win and we have some funding, but we can go into deeper topics, because literally, like, you could build out so many ideas on top of one idea, but to keep it simplified just for the purpose of the hackathon. And let's meet again next week. I mean, if Saturday works for everyone, but it's going to come so quickly. And if we can get everything planned out, so we just, present, that would be phenomenal.
Yeah,
Thank you,
let's
Katie.
lock in the time now, if it's possible. Is Saturday good for everyone? Next week I
It's
have a wedding on Saturday.
Yeah, it
Either
depends
one
for
of
me,
them.
because Saturdays are like my kids' sports days. So Sundays might actually be better for me after church, of course. But that's why. I mean, Saturdays tend to be big sports days for us with kids.
Yeah. Sunday is good for me.
I'm fine for Sunday.
Either day.
Okay, let's do Sunday, same time, 11:30.
Let's do like noon. Is noon okay?
Yeah,
Just after church. If Chris is going to church, it's usually done by noon.
Usually we go a little bit earlier. Yeah, we go a little bit
okay.
earlier, but that should work.
Okay. 11:30.
Let's do noon.
Okay, noon on
Okay.
Sunday.
Noon.
so these links, I can email them to everyone. Paul, if I have you on Discord, could you drop your email in the chat or to me on Discord? But I'll email you the links to this if you feel like you can keep working on this. But I think I might refine kind of where we're at and kind of program in our next steps next week.
Yeah, I think this is a great overall brainstorm, but after our Sunday meeting, we might need to meet twice a week, just leading up to the hackathon.
Okay. Yeah. Love it.
So-
All right. Well, keep dropping thoughts in the Discord. Sorry to cut you off. Go ahead.
I was going to say, put my email in the chats, and then what I'll do is I'll stick around, and then once there's a clear view for what's going to happen in the hackathon, I'll talk to my teammates and figure out how large is your team now? Like how many people?
I think the people that showed up here are
Yeah.
proving that they're part of the team.
Okay. So-
We haven't closed it off. I haven't heard that there's any upper limit.
Okay. Yeah, I think around 6 or 7 is the loose limit.
Yeah.
So
And
Okay.
it's 25 teams total. So it's the biggest hackathon they've ever had. So we have some competition, but they also asked if we would want to partner with another team. And Joe and I just said we're up to it, but we don't know what those other teams look like, or how to meet them. But, that's a possibility too. If we wanted to, it would be splitting, sharing if we win something, but, we could look at that too as partnering with another one of the teams.
Okay, cool. Yeah, if it doesn't work out that we join teams, then I mean, Kilts, we're there to support you all anyway if you decide to use identity and credentials. So,
Okay.
and I'll
Thank you,
show up.
bud.
Yeah, no problem. Also, I'll show up to the next meeting and see where things are at, and then we'll take it from there. You have my support either way.
Thank you.
All right.
Would love to. Thank you, Paul.
Guys,
Thanks,
everyone-
everybody.
Thanks, you guys. Thanks, everyone. I think we're really on to something. Let's win
Yeah.
some
Love
money.
it.
This is awesome. All right. See you guys.
Bye.
Bye.